Liam Westfield, the only son of a powerful billionaire, lived surrounded by wealth, comfort, and everything money could buy. Until one morning, his legs stopped working without warning. Dozens of doctors searched for answers, but none could explain his sudden paralysis. Desperate to save him, his father turned to a private pharmaceutical company promising a miracle. But nothing worked, until a new maid, Sophia, arrived. Her quiet intuition uncovered something others had missed, a secret buried beneath deception, guilt, and corporate greed. What she discovered would not only change Liam's fate, but expose a truth darker than anyone could imagine. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us where you're watching from. Liam Westfield had the kind of childhood most people only saw in glossy magazines. Sunlight pouring through tall mansion windows, a father who owned everything money could buy, and a home filled with silent staff who never said no. But all of it shattered the morning he couldn't move his legs. At first it seemed harmless, a strange stiffness, a complaint every parent might shrug off. But within days it became something darker. Liam's steps grew uncertain. He stumbled often, his laughter turning into tears. Within 2 weeks, his legs refused to move at all. Doctors came in waves. Neurologists, specialists, experts who spoke in complex terms that offered no comfort. None of them could explain what was happening to the billionaire's only son. They ran test after test, promised answers, then quietly disappeared, leaving behind medical bills and confusion. Charles Westfield, once one of New Haven's most powerful men, found himself powerless for the first time. The world that once bent to his will no longer listened. Every door he opened led to another question without an answer. He had lost his wife Evelyn years ago, during childbirth. It was supposed to be a celebration the day their family began. Instead, it became the day his heart cracked forever. Evelyn's last breath had left him with 2 things, their newborn son and a guilt that would never fade. He blamed himself every day for not being there, for not saving her, for not seeing the warning signs that the doctors had missed. That guilt shaped him, turned him cold, quiet, detached. He built walls of money around his grief, thinking he could protect Liam from the same fate. But now, watching his son trapped in a wheelchair with lifeless legs, Charles realized he was losing again. The past was repeating itself, and this time he could do nothing. He tried everything. He hired the best doctors from Europe, brought in medical devices from Japan, and flew specialists in from California to New Haven. But no one could help. Then, one night, a friend whispered a name: Genovate Pharmaceuticals, a private medical firm running advanced treatments for rare neurological disorders. It wasn't officially approved yet, but it had potential. Desperation has a way of silencing caution. Charles called immediately. Within 24 hours, Genovate's representative arrived, sleek, professional, promising miracles in a polished tone. They said Liam's condition was unique, but treatable. All they needed was his signature. They didn't promise healing, only hope. And that was enough for a father who'd already buried one family member. The treatment began almost immediately. Genovate sent daily injections, labeled only with codes. Charles didn't question it. He just waited for a miracle. At first, nothing happened. Then things got worse. Liam's hands began trembling. His appetite faded. He was always tired, often crying in his sleep. Charles called Genovate repeatedly, demanding answers. Their responses were rehearsed. These are normal side effects. The body is adjusting. He wanted to believe them. But every morning, his son looked weaker, not stronger. Soon, the mansion grew silent again. The laughter was gone. The servants left one by one, tired of the tension, the unanswered questions, the guilt that filled the halls. Charles stopped working entirely. He no longer attended board meetings or spoke to investors. His empire ran itself, powered by reputation and autopilot. He barely ate, rarely slept, and never smiled. The house that once hosted parties now felt like a mausoleum. Expensive art hung over lifeless walls. The air smelled of dust and disinfectant. Even the gardens outside had grown over, like nature had stopped caring too. Charles sat beside Liam's bed every night, holding his son's frail hand and whispering, "I'll fix this. I promise." But the words had no weight anymore. They were prayers from a man who no longer believed in miracles. He watched his son fade, not in one day, but slowly, painfully, like the light of a candle fighting against the wind. The guilt became unbearable. Every night Charles dreamt of Evelyn, her pale hand reaching for him, her lips mouthing words he couldn't hear. And every time he woke with the same thought, "I failed her. I'm failing him too." No one dared to speak to him anymore. The few staff that remained kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact. Even the nurse assigned by Genevieve looked frightened most days. Still, the deliveries kept coming. Small coolers of medicine, marked with a simple label, RxC17. No full name, no description. Just letters and numbers that slowly became symbols of dread. Months passed, and Liam barely spoke. His once bright eyes were now distant. Charles tried reading to him, tried bringing toys, but the boy's laughter was gone. His world had shrunk to a single room, filled with machines that hummed louder than hope. Sometimes when Charles stepped out to take a call, he could hear faint sobs echoing down the hallway. The sound tore through him like a blade. But when he returned, Liam would pretend nothing was wrong. He just stared at the window, eyes glazed, whispering softly, "Mommy used to sing to me." Charles couldn't answer. He couldn't even breathe. He had built an empire of success, but couldn't save the only two lives that mattered. The mansion was dying, just like the people in it. Then, one morning, a new arrival came to Westfield Manor. A black sedan stopped by the gate. The woman who stepped out looked ordinary, quiet, steady, with kind eyes that seemed to see through pain without judgment. Her name was Sophia Clark. Charles didn't know it yet, but her arrival would change everything. She wasn't there for money. She wasn't there for comfort. She was there to uncover a truth buried beneath years of silence, grief, and greed. A truth powerful enough to save Liam's life. Or destroy them all. The morning Sophia Clark arrived, the sky above Westfield Manor was draped in grey. The mansion looked like a monument to forgotten things, vast, lifeless, and echoing with ghosts of what used to be. The front doors creaked as she entered, suitcase in one hand, her breath fogging in the cold air. Charles Westfield appeared at the top of the staircase. His once sharp posture was gone, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. "The boys' room is upstairs," he said without greeting. "You'll find everything you need." Then he turned away before she could even respond. Sophia had seen that look before. Men swallowed by guilt, trapped in grief too deep to admit. But there was something uniquely hollow in Charles's eyes. It wasn't just pain, it was punishment, the kind that never stops. The air inside was thick with stillness. No footsteps, no laughter. Even the ticking of the clocks felt muted. She passed long hallways lined with faded portraits. Charles, his late wife Evelyn, and a smiling infant boy who could only be Liam. Every frame seemed to whisper the same thing. What went wrong? Sophia unpacked in the small servants' quarters at the end of the hall. It was simple. One window, one bed, one desk, but it didn't matter. She wasn't here for comfort. She was here because she needed purpose again. Years ago she had lost her own child, a baby girl who never took her first breath. That pain had carved a hole so deep in her that no amount of time had filled it. She never spoke of it, not even now. But every time she saw a child in pain, something inside her moved, like a wound remembering it once bled. Her first day passed quietly. She found her way through the kitchen, spotless but unused. Dust coated the countertops. The fridge hummed half empty. The smell of bleach lingered faintly in the air. She opened cabinets out of habit, noting how nothing seemed touched for weeks. Later that afternoon, she climbed the stairs toward Liam's room. The door was closed. She knocked once, no answer. Then she leaned closer and listened. Nothing but silence. Charles hadn't told her much, only that Liam couldn't walk and needed daily assistance. But there was something else in his tone when he spoke about his son, not just fear, but shame. Sophia turned away, deciding to wait. It was her first day, and she knew better than to push too soon. That evening, as dusk poured through the windows, she caught sight of Charles walking through the hallway. His expression was blank, his gaze unfocused, like a man walking through his own house, as if it belonged to someone else. "Will he have dinner?" Sophia asked gently. Charles stopped but didn't turn around. "He doesn't eat with anyone anymore," he said flatly. "Just leave a tray outside his door." She nodded, though the answer hurt more than it should have. After setting a tray, a bowl of soup and a glass of milk, outside Liam's room, she stood there for a long moment, unsure what to do next. Then she walked back to her quarters, the sound of her own footsteps echoing through the empty hall. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The silence of the mansion wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Around 10 o'clock she got up and decided to check the hallways again. As she passed Liam's door, she froze. A faint sound reached her ears, a small, broken voice whispering in the dark. "Why don't my legs work anymore?" The question wasn't directed at anyone, but it pierced through her like a blade. He wasn't crying loudly, just murmuring to himself, the kind of quiet sadness that comes from hopelessness, not fear. Sophia pressed her palm gently against the door. She didn't open it. She didn't want to startle him, but in that moment, something inside her shifted. This boy wasn't just sick, he was suffering in silence. The next morning, Sophia began cleaning near his room. No one had asked her to. The corridors were coated with dust, the air heavy with neglect. As she wiped the wooden railings, she noticed the tray from the night before, untouched. The soup had gone cold, the milk curdled. Her heart sank. She carried it back to the kitchen, quietly preparing something fresh, mashed potatoes and light broth. She brought it upstairs again, left it by the door and whispered, "I'll leave it here if you get hungry, okay?" There was no response, but when she came back an hour later, the bowl was half empty. It was a start. Over the next few days, Sophia settled into a rhythm. She worked silently, restoring the manor's rhythm one task at a time, opening windows, letting in light, scrubbing away the thick layer of sorrow that coated everything. She rarely saw Charles. When she did, he was either locked in his study or sitting outside Liam's door, staring at nothing. The house was filled with presence, but not life. Sophia learned the boy's patterns by observing quietly. He stayed up late, sometimes murmuring to himself. He didn't ask for toys or music or company. He existed in stillness, like a child waiting for the world to forget him. One night, as Sophia folded laundry near her room, she heard the faintest sob again. This time she didn't hesitate. She walked to his door and knocked gently. "Liam?" she said softly. "It's Sophia. I'm just down the hall if you need anything." No answer. Only the sound of soft breathing. Then, finally, a whisper. "It hurts," he said. "My legs, they don't listen anymore." Sophia pressed her forehead against the door. "I know," she said quietly. "But I'm here. I'll stay with you." He didn't respond, but the crying stopped. That was enough. From that night on, Sophia made herself a promise. She wouldn't treat this as just another job. She had seen too many people look away when things got painful. She wouldn't be one of them. Every morning after, she began her routine early. She noticed how the rooms closest to Liam's were cleaner, the air fresher, the silence softer. She found herself humming as she worked, not because she was happy, but because she wanted him to hear that someone else was alive nearby. One morning, while dusting near the window, she saw a small box sitting on a table near Liam's door. It was a medical case, clean, metallic, marked with a Genovate logo. At exactly 9 a.m., A car pulled into the driveway. A courier in a dark coat stepped out, holding a small cooler. Without speaking, he handed it to Charles, who took it upstairs. Sophia watched from the window. The man never looked up, never smiled, never stayed longer than a minute. Something about the exchange didn't feel right. Later that morning, as she brought fresh towels to Liam's room, she saw the box again, empty now. On the side was a small printed code, RXC17. No label, no explanation. Just sterile letters. She didn't know what it meant then, but she would soon learn that those 4 characters were the beginning of everything, and they would change the Westfield family forever. The next few days slipped by quietly inside Westfield Manor. Sophia Clark followed her routine with quiet precision, cleaning, organizing, cooking simple meals, and caring for the boy she had yet to truly meet. But every time she passed Liam's door, she felt it. That invisible weight in the air, that grief that pressed against the walls like fog that refused to lift. Charles Westfield barely spoke to her. He was always behind closed doors, pacing, whispering over the phone, or sitting in silence at his desk. Sometimes she'd hear muffled sounds through the door, glass breaking, a drawer slamming, his voice trembling with frustration. It wasn't anger directed at her. It was the sound of a man caving in on himself. Sophia learned to move quietly. The few remaining staff avoided conversation, too afraid to break the heavy calm that hung over the house. But she wasn't afraid. She had lived in silence before. Silence was where her strength was born. She started leaving little things outside Liam's room. Fresh water, small folded notes that simply said, "Good morning," or "I hope you slept well." She didn't know if he read them, but once she found one folded neatly on her tray with a shaky line drawn across it. It wasn't a word, but it was an answer. The house was massive, but it had begun to feel smaller somehow. Every sound carried, footsteps on marble, the faint hum of electricity, the low thud of doors closing. The manor was alive, but only just. Sophia tried to make it livable again. She reopened the curtains in rooms long left dark, dusted, forgotten shelves, and aired out spaces that smelled like stale sorrow. Every little act of care was her quiet rebellion against decay. By the end of her first week, she found herself drawn to Liam's door every night, listening, not to intrude, but to understand. She could hear his small breaths, sometimes shallow, sometimes uneven. She could almost feel his loneliness through the wooden frame. Then, one morning, something unexpected happened. Sophia had just finished straightening the hallway rugs when Charles walked past her, heading upstairs with the same cold case from Genovate Pharmaceuticals in his hands. "Is that his medicine?" she asked, her tone careful. Charles stopped for half a second, not looking at her. "It's part of his treatment," he said shortly, and then kept walking. She nodded silently, but the conversation stuck in her mind. Something about the way he said it didn't sound like certainty. It sounded like denial. At exactly 9 a.m., as always, a black car arrived outside. The same courier in the same dark coat stepped out, carrying the same cooler. His movements were mechanical. Hand over, sign here, drive away. Sophia watched from behind a curtain. The man never looked up, never spoke a word. She wrote it down in a small notebook she kept hidden in her drawer. Date, time, details. She didn't know why yet, but something in her gut told her she'd need it. That afternoon, as she helped Liam into a sitting position, she noticed a small glass bottle on the bedside table. It was half full, colorless, with only a code, RXC17. When she reached to move it, Liam's hand shot out. "Don't touch that," he said softly. His voice trembled, not from anger but fear. Sophia froze. "It's okay," she said gently. "I was just trying to tidy up." Liam's eyes welled up. "It's the medicine, but it hurts." The words landed like ice. Sophia knelt down beside him. "Hurts how, sweetheart?" He looked away, biting his lip. It burns every time they give it to me. Afterward, my arms get heavy. I can't sleep. It feels like something's crawling inside." Her stomach tightened. "Did you tell your father?" Liam hesitated, then nodded. "He said it's supposed to help, but it doesn't. It never helps." Sophia reached for a tissue and began to wipe the bottle gently. As soon as it touched her skin, she flinched. The liquid had a faint sting, sharp and metallic. She looked at her fingertips and saw a faint redness spreading there. She set it down carefully. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to take it right now." But Liam shook his head, eyes wide. "I have to. They said if I stop, I'll never walk again." The fear in his voice was pure, honest, and ancient, the kind that doesn't come from disobedience, but from believing something terrible will happen if you stop doing what you're told. Sophia's heart broke quietly. That night, when she stepped out to get a towel, she returned to find the bottle gone. She hadn't heard anyone enter. The hallway was empty. The next morning, she went straight to Charles's office. "Mr. Westfield, I think something's wrong with the medicine." He looked up from his desk, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. "You're not qualified to say that." "It's making him worse," she said softly. "He's weaker, paler, he's in pain." Charles's tone hardened. "Do not interfere with his treatment, Sophia. Genovate knows what they're doing. I'm paying them to know what they're doing. But if you just look—" "Enough!" His voice cut through the air like glass. "You're here to take care of the house, not diagnose my son." The silence afterward was brutal. Sophia nodded slowly and left the office, her chest tight, her pulse unsteady, but her mind was already racing. That afternoon, she watched from the window again. The black car arrived at its usual time. The courier handed over the small cooler and drove away. Sophia waited until he disappeared down the road, then slipped outside. She crouched by the gravel driveway and wrote down his license plate number. She didn't know what she'd do with it yet, but every secret left a trail, and she was beginning to find it. Later that night, she searched the internet for RxC-17. No results. No medical databases, no research archives. It was as if the compound didn't exist. She closed her laptop, her reflection staring back at her through the dark screen. "They're hiding something," she whispered. When she went back upstairs, Liam was awake, sitting up with his sketchbook. He had drawn a picture, stick figures in front of a big house. One of them was a woman with long hair. "That's you," he said quietly. Sophia smiled. "You made me taller than your dad." He giggled for the first time in weeks, and the sound filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. But even as she laughed, her eyes caught the faint red marks on his arm, small bruises where the injections had gone in. Her smile faded. That night she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling in the dark, her mind looping the same thought over and over again. What if this isn't treatment at all? Something was wrong inside Westfield Manor, and Sophia Clark was done pretending not to see it. Days passed, but Sophia's mind wouldn't rest. Every moment she spent inside Westfield Manor felt like walking through the middle of a secret, one she could feel breathing in the walls, watching from the corners. The silence was no longer peace. It was warning. She started keeping a hidden notebook under her bed, documenting everything: delivery times, bottle codes, how Liam reacted after each injection. Patterns began to form. The more medicine he received, the worse his condition became. His fever rose, his breathing slowed, and his eyes lost their color. Genovate claimed it was all part of the process, but the process was slowly killing him. One evening, while she was changing Liam's bedsheets, something caught her eye, a faint chemical stain on the wooden floor near his nightstand. She knelt down, tracing it with her fingers. The discoloration shimmered faintly under the light, like something had spilled there recently. That was when Liam said quietly, "That's where it fell." Sophia looked up. "What fell?" "The medicine," he pointed. "It broke one day when I tried to move it. Dad got really mad. He said I ruined everything. Her breath caught. "You touched it?" He nodded. It burned. Sophia froze. She remembered the faint sting she'd felt on her own fingers that day. Her heart began to pound. Whatever was in that medicine wasn't meant to heal. It was toxic. Later that night, she went to Charles's office again. The door was half open. He sat behind his desk, surrounded by papers, the glow of a single lamp making deep shadows across his tired face. "Mr. Westfield," she began softly. "That medication, it's hurting him." Charles didn't look up. "You don't understand the situation." "Then help me understand," she said gently. "You've seen him. He's worse. You know it too." He finally lifted his head. His eyes were hollow. "Do you think I haven't noticed?" His voice cracked. "Do you think I sleep at night knowing he's in pain?" "Then stop giving it to him," she pleaded. "I can't," he said sharply. "They promised results. They said if I stop, the damage might become permanent." Sophia stepped closer. "You're trusting the same people who can't even tell you what they're injecting into your son. Look at him, Charles. Does this look like recovery?" His silence was the answer. For a long time, the only sound was the wind against the windows. Then Charles whispered, "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do," she said. "You can listen," but he turned away. "That's enough, Sophia. Please leave." She left, but not quietly in her mind. That night, after the manor went still, she sat at her desk, hands trembling as she opened her notebook again. She flipped to a blank page and wrote 3 words at the top. "Something is wrong." Then she wrote everything she knew. She was halfway through her notes when something strange happened. She heard the faintest sound outside, tires rolling over gravel. She looked out the window. Another car, black and unmarked, had pulled into the driveway. The courier again, but it was past midnight. He wasn't supposed to be there. Sophia watched as the man walked to the side door, carrying a small case. A light flicked on in Charles's office. The 2 men spoke briefly before disappearing down the hall toward Liam's room. Her heart dropped. She waited until they left, then crept upstairs, every step careful and silent. When she reached Liam's door, she saw it half open. A faint chemical scent filled the air. On the table sat another vial, smaller this time, almost clear. She picked it up and studied it. The label was different. Instead of RxC-17, it said RxC-17B, Phase 2. She didn't know what that meant, but she didn't like the sound of it. The next morning, the car was gone, and Charles acted as though nothing had happened. He avoided her eyes, his voice softer than usual. "Make sure Liam eats today," he said quietly, and walked away. Sophia knew what she saw. She knew that whatever Genevieve was doing, it had escalated. But what could she do? She was just a maid, an outsider. If she accused a billion-dollar company, no one would listen. Then fate gave her something she wasn't supposed to find. While cleaning Evelyn's old bedroom, a room no one had entered in years, Sophia noticed a drawer that didn't open all the way. She tugged, and a small leather-bound journal slid out, covered in dust. She opened it. On the first page, in soft, faded ink, was a name: Evelyn Westfield. Sophia hesitated. Out of respect, she should have closed it, but curiosity and fear pushed her forward. She turned the pages carefully, reading about Evelyn's excitement over her pregnancy, her love for Charles, her dreams for their son. But halfway through, the tone shifted. Evelyn had started describing strange symptoms: tingling legs, dizziness, weakness in her arms. "The doctors say it's nothing, just fatigue," she wrote. "But I know something is wrong." Sophia's eyes widened. The descriptions matched Liam's almost exactly. Then she read further. Evelyn mentioned a supplement provided by a private medical program through Genevieve Pharmaceuticals. She wrote that it came in unmarked bottles, delivered straight to the house. The doctors promised it would strengthen her and the baby. Sophia's hands shook. Genevieve. The same company. The same secrecy. The last entry stopped mid-sentence, one day before Evelyn's death. There were no final words, just an unfinished line. They tell me I'm imagining things, but... The pen stroke ended abruptly. Sophia sat frozen, the room spinning around her. Evelyn's mysterious symptoms, her sudden death during childbirth, and now Liam's condition. It was all connected. She clutched the diary to her chest and whispered, "They've been doing this for years." Her first instinct was to show Charles, but a voice inside stopped her. He wouldn't believe her, not yet. That night she reread the diary again, noting every date, every doctor's name, every reference to the supplement. The same pattern repeated itself. Unmarked medicine, worsening symptoms. No accountability. It was all there. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It was buried in plain sight. As the clock struck midnight, Sophia closed the diary slowly, her decision made. She would find out what Genovate was really doing, even if she had to do it alone. The next morning she packed the diary into her bag and stepped outside into the cold morning air. The black courier car drove by the gate again. She watched it this time, not with fear, but with resolve. Something inside her had changed. Sophia Clark was no longer just the maid at Westfield Manor. She was the one who was going to uncover the truth that powerful men had killed to keep hidden. Sophia didn't sleep that night. The diary sat on her desk, its pages fanned open like a confession begging to be heard. Every word Evelyn had written echoed in her mind. The weakness, the tremors, the fear that no one believed her. The same things Liam was living through now. By morning, Sophia's fear had hardened into something else. Determination. She made copies of Evelyn's final entries in her notebook, then drew a timeline. The symptoms, the unmarked medicine, the company name. When she was done, the pattern was undeniable. The same illness had destroyed a mother and was now consuming her son. It wasn't coincidence. It was continuation. She waited until late afternoon before approaching Charles. The timing had to be careful. Not while he was angry, not when he was distant. She found him in his study, the fireplace throwing dull orange light across the room. He looked up only briefly as she entered, his face pale and tired. "I found something," she said softly. He didn't look interested. "If it's about the medication again, I've already told you, it's not about the medication," she interrupted gently. "It's about Evelyn." That made him pause. He looked up sharply, suspicion and pain crossing his face. "What about her?" Sophia stepped closer and placed the diary on his desk. "I found this in her old room." He stared at it for a long time, his jaw tight, his hand trembling slightly before he reached for it. When he saw the handwriting on the first page, his expression shifted. "This is her writing." His voice was barely above a whisper. Sophia nodded. "You need to read it." He hesitated before turning the pages. As his eyes scanned the entries, his face began to change. Confusion first, then disbelief, and finally something darker. When he reached the final unfinished line, he closed the diary and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "This means nothing," he said finally. Though his voice lacked conviction, "It means everything," Sophia replied softly. She described the same symptoms Liam has now, the same weakness, the same pain. And she wrote that her supplement came from Genovate. Charles rubbed his temples, shaking his head. "That was decades ago. You think a prenatal supplement from then has something to do with my son's condition now?" "I think it's more than that," Sophia said. "Whatever they gave her back then, it didn't end with her." Charles stood abruptly, walking to the window. "Stop, please. You don't understand what you're suggesting." "I do," she said firmly. "And you do too. That company has been lying to you from the start." He turned, his eyes wet. "Do you think I want to believe that? Do you think I want to accept that I trusted the people who are hurting him?" Sophia didn't answer. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice breaking. "I lost my wife in that room. And now you're telling me I'm losing my son for the same reason." "Yes," she said quietly. "But this time, You can still stop it." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment something in him cracked. But before he could speak, the phone on his desk rang. The sound sliced through the silence like a blade. He answered. Sophia stepped back, watching. "Yes," he said tightly. "Dr. Reed?" "Yes, he's stable." A pause. "No, I haven't told anyone." "Of course not. We're cooperating fully." Sophia froze at the name. "Dr. Reed." The voice on the other end was calm but firm, just loud enough for her to catch fragments. "No discussions with outsiders. No changes in dosage. You've already received significant compensation. Don't complicate things, Charles." Charles's hand shook. "You can't threaten me." "Then don't make us," the voice replied coldly. The line went dead. Sophia's chest tightened. "Who was that?" she asked. "No one," Charles said too quickly. He picked up the diary and shoved it into a drawer. "Forget about this, please." But she couldn't. She'd heard the fear in his voice, the same fear she'd seen in parents who knew too much and spoke too late. That night, when the mansion grew quiet, Sophia opened her notebook again. She wrote everything she had overheard. Dr. Reed, threats, payments. She added them to the growing pile of evidence. From then on, she started watching the house more carefully. Every delivery, every shadow, every conversation. 2 mornings later, a black car arrived, not the usual courier. This time, a tall man stepped out wearing a navy suit and a polite, chilling smile. He introduced himself as Dr. Nathan Reed, clinical director at Genovate. Sophia stood at the end of the hallway, pretending to dust. Charles greeted him stiffly. "You didn't say you were coming," Dr. Reed smiled faintly. "Just wanted to see our progress firsthand." He opened a small metal case, revealing several glass vials identical to the ones Sophia had seen before. He handed them over. "These should stabilize the boy's nervous system." Charles accepted them without speaking. Dr. Reed walked toward Liam's room. Sophia's hands froze around the cloth she was holding. He opened the door gently and leaned over the boy. "How are we feeling today, young man?" Liam didn't answer. "Don't worry," the doctor said softly, slipping something into the pocket of Liam's wheelchair. "This one will help you sleep better." Then he turned, smiled at Charles, and left as calmly as he had arrived. Sophia's heart pounded. She waited until the car was gone before rushing into Liam's room. She checked the wheelchair pocket and found it. A small ampule, clear and cold, unlabeled. She held it up to the light. No markings, no instructions. Only a faint metallic sheen inside the glass. She wrapped it in a handkerchief and hid it in her apron. Later that night, she sat on her bed staring at it, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She couldn't shake the image of the man's smile, his careful tone, his absolute confidence. This wasn't a treatment. It was a cover-up. Her instinct screamed it, and Evelyn's diary confirmed it, but now she had proof in her hands. The next day, she went to the library in town under the pretext of buying groceries. There, she used the public computer to search for RxC17 and Genovate pharmaceuticals. Nothing. No official record, no study, no mention. But when she searched deeper, she found a small, outdated research file under a different name, Helix Core Labs. Her eyes widened. It was listed as a subsidiary of Genovate. The description mentioned neurological studies in pediatric subjects, funded by private clients. No details, no public documentation. Just a single archived report that mentioned synthetic nerve inhibition compounds. Sophia printed it immediately and hid it under her coat. When she returned to the mansion, she saw the pattern clearly. It wasn't sickness. It was science gone wrong. Genovate hadn't just failed. They had experimented. Evelyn, Liam, maybe others. She looked out the window at the grey sky above Westfield Manor and whispered to herself, "They've been doing this for years, and they think no one will stop them." She looked down at her notebook and wrote 3 new words across the page. Not this time. Sophia Clark had made her decision. From that night onward, Sophia Clark was no longer just a maid. She became something else, a shadow within Westfield Manor, a pair of unseen eyes quietly piecing together the fragments of a buried truth. Every whisper, every delivery, every unopened door became a clue. She kept her notebook close, updating it in secret. The dates lined up perfectly. Every time a new vial of RxC-17 arrived, Liam's health plummeted. His fevers spiked, his breathing grew shallow, and the dark circles beneath his eyes deepened. When deliveries were delayed, his symptoms eased, his color returning slightly. This wasn't treatment. It was deliberate poisoning. The evidence was overwhelming, except none of it could be proven without real documentation. And Sophia knew Genovate Pharmaceuticals wouldn't leave any paper trail that easy, but she wasn't alone anymore. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Nurse Rachel, the only other person who stayed full-time at the manor, entered the kitchen. Her eyes looked nervous but determined. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" she whispered. Sophia froze. "Noticed what?" "The medicine." "It's wrong." Sophia turned fully to her. "How long have you known?" Rachel looked away. "Too long. But I can't say anything. They'll destroy anyone who tries." Sophia stepped closer. "You've seen what it's doing to him. You can't just stand by." The nurse's voice cracked. "You don't understand. I used to work for them, Genovate. They run everything through fear. Once you're inside, you don't leave." Sophia's pulse quickened. "Then help me expose them." Rachel hesitated, torn between fear and guilt. "There's a file," she whispered finally. "An internal record. Every patient they've ever tested on. It's kept under Helix Core Labs, Genovate's research branch. It's not online. You'd need physical access." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "In the old industrial quarter, off Silver Lake Road," Rachel said. "But you didn't hear it from me." That was enough. The next morning, Charles received another call from Dr. Reed. Sophia overheard from the hallway. His tone was calm, almost rehearsed. "Your son's dosage must continue without interruption. You're close, Charles. Don't let emotion cloud your progress." Progress. The word sent a chill down her spine. That night, while Charles drank alone in his study, Sophia quietly took the hidden ampule she had found in Liam's chair and wrapped it in a handkerchief. She placed it beside the copy of Evelyn's diary and her notebook. Those three things together, the vial, the words, the records, were enough to draw blood. The next day, she made a decision. When the courier arrived for the daily delivery, Sophia slipped out a few minutes later, following the black sedan from a distance. She stayed far enough back not to be seen, but close enough to trace its route. It drove across the edge of town, through the outskirts, until it reached a warehouse marked Helix Core Labs. There was no signboard, no visible security, just a chain-link fence and a faded logo. Sophia stopped at the corner of the street, taking in every detail. The address, the vehicle code, the security guards by the door. Then she turned back. She had proof now, but proof without witnesses meant nothing. When she returned to Westfield Manor, she found Charles in the living room, staring blankly at the fireplace. His face was grey, his hands trembling slightly. "You're hiding something," he said quietly, not looking up. Sophia's chest tightened. "I'm trying to save your son." He turned toward her. "Save him from what? You think you're the only one who cares?" "I think you're too scared to see the truth," she said calmly. He stood up, anger rising. "Truth? The truth is that every doctor I've trusted has failed. Every plan, every prayer, nothing works. Genovate is all I have left." Evelyn thought the same thing, Sophia said softly. The words stopped him cold. He looked at her sharply. "What did you just say?" She trusted them too, and it killed her. Charles's eyes filled with confusion and dread. "You're lying." Sophia reached into her apron and pulled out the printed research file she'd found at the library. "I wish I was." She placed the paper in front of him. He scanned the words, neurological test subjects, fetal nerve trials, compound RxC17. The color drained from his face. "This can't be real." "It's real," Sophia whispered. "And your family has been part of their experiment from the beginning." Charles's voice trembled. "Why would they do this?" "Why, my son?" "Because they could. Because people like you, people with power and guilt, are easier to control." He sank into the chair, silent, his entire body shaking. The fire crackled beside him, but the room felt cold. After a long pause, he spoke again. "If what you're saying is true, we have to stop them." Sophia nodded. "Then help me." For the first time, they stood on the same side. That night, they worked together. Sophia laid out all her notes, every page of Evelyn's diary, the photos she'd taken of the vials and deliveries. Charles added his own documents, signed invoices, payment receipts, confidential reports. By dawn, the truth filled the desk like a crime scene. Names, dates, formulas, payments, and signatures. They had everything they needed to expose Genovate Pharmaceuticals. But danger was already closing in. When Sophia left the study to fetch coffee, she noticed something that froze her mid-step. The security monitor, which displayed the manor's exterior cameras, had gone dark. Every feed, every angle. She called for Charles. Together they checked the power box in the basement. Several wires had been severed, not cut cleanly, but ripped. "Someone's been here," she whispered. Charles's face turned pale. "They know." He rushed to the living room, pulling back the curtain just enough to see outside. At the edge of the driveway, a sleek black car sat idling. The same kind they'd seen every morning, except this one hadn't moved in hours. The headlights flicked off. Then came the sound of a door opening. Sophia's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "What do we do?" Charles glanced toward Liam's room. "We protect him." Sophia nodded, tucking her notebook inside her coat. Charles took the evidence folder and locked it in the hidden space beneath the stairs. The tension in the air was electric, every sound amplified. The ticking clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old floorboards. Outside, footsteps approached the porch. Sophia grabbed a metal candle stand, clutching it tight. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass of the front door, and then 3 slow knocks echoed through the silence. Charles whispered, "Don't open it." But before either of them could move, a calm, familiar voice spoke from the other side, the kind that sounded polite, even when dripping with threat. "Good evening. Mr. Westfield, Dr. Reed would like a word." Sophia's blood ran cold. The man from Genovate was here, and this time he hadn't come for the medicine. He had come for the truth. The knock echoed through Westfield Manor like the toll of a warning bell. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, each one heavier than the last. Charles froze. Sophia could see the muscles in his jaw tighten as he stared at the door, unmoving. The man outside didn't knock again. Instead, his calm, confident voice carried through the silence. "Mr. Westfield, it's Dr. Nathan Reed. Let's not make this difficult." The way he said it, too calm, too certain, sent a chill straight through Sophia. She reached for Charles's arm. "Don't open it," she whispered. "He's not here to talk." But Charles's eyes were distant. He wasn't thinking clearly. "If I don't, they already have," she interrupted. "You've seen what they've done to Liam." A beat of silence passed between them. Then, from behind the door, came the faint sound of a latch being tested. Dr. Reed wasn't waiting for permission. He was checking if it was locked. Charles swallowed hard. "He'll break in." Sophia stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Then let him try." Without another word, she pulled Liam's wheelchair closer to the hallway and motioned for Charles to grab the folder from under the stairs. They needed to be ready to move, or hide, but before they could do either, the front door swung open with a sharp, metallic click. Dr. Nathan Reed stepped inside, wearing his same immaculate navy suit, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. Two men in black coats followed behind him, their faces hard and silent. Charles stiffened. "You can't just walk in here." Dr. Reed smiled faintly. "Forgive the intrusion, but I'm afraid you've made things complicated." Sophia stood her ground. "You've already made them complicated." He turned toward her, that eerie composure never slipping. "Ah, the maid. I've heard about you. You've been rather curious." Her eyes narrowed. "Curious people find answers." His smile faded. "And sometimes they disappear." Charles stepped between them. "You're not taking anything from this house." "Oh, I'm not here for the house," Dr. Reed said, his tone turning cold. "I'm here for the data, the files, the samples, the evidence you've been collecting." Sophia's stomach dropped. He knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," Charles said, but his voice cracked. Dr. Reed chuckled. "Please, Charles, let's not insult each other's intelligence. My people monitor every communication connected to this property. You think your maid's late-night research went unnoticed?" Sophia felt her pulse race. He knew everything. Dr. Reed took a slow step forward, his tone dropping to a dangerous calm. "Hand over the evidence and this ends quietly. No lawyers, no police. Your son receives continued care and you both move on with your lives." Charles's face twisted. "You call this care?" "It's survival," Dr. Reed said. "The boy is alive because of us. He's dying because of you." Sophia's voice rang out, sharp as a blade. The two men behind Reed shifted subtly, readying themselves. Reed raised a hand, signaling them to stop. "You're brave," he said to her. "Bravery is admirable, until it becomes foolish." Sophia's mind raced. She needed time. She needed something to stall him. "You talk about survival," she said slowly, "but all I see are victims. Evelyn Westfield was one of them, wasn't she?" The name made him falter, just for a second. Sophia pressed forward. "She was part of your program too. The supplements, the unmarked bottles. It started with her, didn't it?" Reed's expression hardened. "You should have stayed out of this." "She wrote everything," Sophia said firmly. "Every symptom, every lie she was told. And now her son is suffering for it." Reed's jaw tightened. "Where is it?" Sophia stayed silent. He turned to his men. "Search the house." The two men moved quickly, splitting off toward the office and hallway. Charles stepped forward, blocking one of them. "You're not touching anything." The man pushed him aside easily, sending him stumbling against the wall. Sophia rushed to him, helping him up. "Charles, we have to go." He shook his head. "We can't leave Liam." "I'll get him," she said. "You hide the evidence." Before he could protest, she ran to Liam's room. He was half asleep, his face pale but calm. She knelt beside him, whispering, "We're leaving, sweetheart. Stay quiet, okay?" Liam blinked at her, confused but trusting. She lifted him gently into his wheelchair, her hands trembling, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they'd hear it from the hall. Meanwhile, Charles was cornered in the study. One of Reed's men had found the hidden compartment under the stairs. He yanked out the folder, flipping through the pages. "Found it, sir?" Reed took it, glancing through the evidence with that same eerie detachment. "Such a shame," he murmured. "You really should have destroyed these." When Sophia reappeared with Liam, Charles was standing near the desk, blood trickling from his lip. "Let them go," he said hoarsely. "This is between you and me," Reed smirked. "You think I'm a villain in your story, but you paid us, Charles. You funded every dose, every trial, every test. You didn't just sign contracts. You signed your son's suffering." Charles's face twisted in anguish. "I didn't know." "That's the beauty of it," Reed said quietly. "You never do." Sophia's voice cut through the air. "He knows now. And the world will too." Reed turned, finally losing his composure. "You don't have the reach to expose me." Sophia smiled faintly. "I don't need reach. I just need truth." Reed's eyes flickered with sudden realization. Too late. Because in her pocket, Sophia's phone was already recording. For the last 10 minutes, it had captured everything, every threat, every confession, every word. Charles noticed too. His eyes widened slightly, just enough for Sophia to see that he understood. Reed took a step toward her. "Give me that phone." Sophia stood her ground. "Come, take it." Before he could move, a sound split the air, the sharp screech of tires outside, followed by flashing red and blue lights cutting through the night. Reed froze. His men looked to him uncertain. Sophia exhaled shakily. "You said you monitored every communication here," she whispered. "So you should have known I wasn't recording this for myself." Outside, sirens wailed louder. Charles looked at her in shock. "You sent it?" She nodded. "Live stream. Straight to someone who believes in truth more than fear." Reed's mask cracked. "You stupid!" The front door burst open. Police officers flooded in, shouting commands. Reed's men dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Reed tried to run, but 2 officers caught him, forcing him to the ground. Sophia backed away, holding Liam close as chaos filled the room. Charles stood frozen, watching as the man who had haunted his life was dragged away in handcuffs. Reed struggled as they read him his rights, shouting, "You don't understand what you're destroying." But no one listened. It was over. As officers searched the property, Sophia felt her knees weaken. Charles caught her before she fell. "It's done," he whispered. "It's finally done." But deep down, Sophia knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Because exposing the truth was one thing. Healing from it would take much longer. The flashing lights outside Westfield Manor painted the night in red and blue streaks, reflecting off the marble like fire. After years of silence and shadows, the house was finally filled with voices, police, medics, and truth. Charles stood frozen in the foyer, watching as Dr. Nathan Reed, once polished and untouchable, was dragged away in handcuffs. His calm mask had shattered, his voice spitting venom. "You think this ends with me?" he shouted. "You have no idea what you've started." Sophia held Liam close, whispering softly, "Don't look, sweetheart. It's all over now." But her own hands were trembling. A female detective approached, her tone steady but kind. "Mrs. Clark? I'm Detective Hale. We received your live recording." "You did the right thing," Sophia nodded, her voice faint. "I just wanted to save him." Detective Hale's gaze softened. "You did more than that. You exposed something much bigger." 2 officers passed, carrying sealed vials marked RxC-17. "This isn't medicine," one of them muttered. "It's chemical nerve suppression. Dangerous stuff." Sophia's heart skipped. "Can it be reversed?" The officer hesitated. "If we move quickly, maybe." Minutes later, paramedics rushed into the house. They surrounded Liam, checking his vitals, adjusting monitors, working quickly. A young doctor from St. Helena Medical Center turned toward Charles and Sophia. "The compound hasn't destroyed his nerves, but it's blocking them. We can counteract it with the antidote formula, if we start now." Charles's knees almost gave out. "Then start. Please, just start." The medics carefully lifted Liam onto a stretcher. His small voice broke the air. "Are the bad people gone, Dad?" Charles knelt beside him, brushing his hair gently. "Yes, son. They're gone for good." Sophia's eyes filled as she whispered, "You're safe now. Liam, I promise." The ambulance sirens faded into the night, carrying him toward the fight he still had to win. Outside, the last police cars pulled away, leaving Charles and Sophia standing under the cold glow of the porch lights. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Charles finally said, "You saved him, and I almost lost him trying to save him." Sophia looked at him, her voice breaking. "You didn't fail him. You trusted the wrong people, but now you can fix it." He nodded slowly. No more silence. The following days were a blur. News spread like wildfire. Headlines called it the Genovate scandal. Sophia's recording went viral. Every confession, every threat, every lie. Reporters swarmed the manor gates demanding statements. But Charles refused interviews. He stayed where he belonged, by his son's side. At St. Helena Medical Center, the doctors worked around the clock. Liam's body trembled through the detox. Every hour was agony, but slowly the monitors began to stabilize. His breathing evened. The tremors eased. Sophia barely left his bedside. She read softly when he was awake and prayed silently when he wasn't. Charles stayed nearby, silent but steady, his guilt slowly transforming into resolve. Days blurred together. Then one morning everything changed. Liam blinked awake, weak but alert. "Dad," he whispered. "I can feel my toes." Charles froze. "What?" Liam smiled faintly. "They're tingling." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Charles sank to his knees, tears spilling down his face. Sophia pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing softly. It wasn't much, but it was life. Over the next few days, Liam began to move again. His fingers twitched. His legs responded faintly when the nurses tested them. Each small sign was a miracle. When the news reached the investigators, they confirmed everything Sophia had feared. Genovate Pharmaceuticals and its secret division, Helix Core Labs, had been running experimental neurological trials on children for years, disguising them as treatments. Evelyn Westfield had been among their first patients. Her death was never a tragedy of nature. It was a result of the same toxin now leaving her son's body. Charles wept when he saw her name in the files. "They killed her," he whispered. Sophia put her hand on his. "And they almost killed him, but not anymore." That evening, Detective Hale visited the hospital to update them. "The CEO, Alexander Cross, and several executives have been arrested. Dr. Reed's confession, along with your recordings, sealed it." Sophia nodded, relief and exhaustion washing through her. "It's over then." The detective gave a faint smile. "No, Mrs. Clark, it's just beginning. But this time, it's in the right hands." When she left, Charles looked through the glass window at his son. Liam was asleep, his small chest rising and falling steadily. For the first time in years, peace filled the room instead of fear. He turned to Sophia. "I don't know how to thank you," she shook her head. "Don't thank me. Just make sure no one else ever goes through what your family did." He nodded. "I will." As the sun rose over New Haven the next morning, the city below buzzed with headlines and outrage. But inside St. Helena Medical Center, all that mattered was one small miracle: Liam Westfield, alive, breathing, and slowly finding strength again. Sophia watched him smile faintly in his sleep, the light touching his face like a promise. The truth had cost them everything, but it had also given them something priceless back: hope. Weeks passed since the night Genovate Pharmaceuticals fell. The world outside exploded with outrage, but inside St. Helena Medical Center, time moved differently, quietly, carefully, and with hope stitched into every heartbeat. Sophia spent every day beside Liam's bed, watching color return to his cheeks. Each morning, doctors measured his progress with cautious optimism. Each night, she whispered, "You're getting stronger, sweetheart. Just a little more." Charles rarely left the hospital either. The man who had once commanded boardrooms now carried his son's blanket through sterile hallways, waiting for nurses to nod and say the words he prayed for. "He's improving." And then one morning, it happened. Sophia was reading to Liam when he interrupted softly. "Can I try to stand?" She blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. "You want to what?" He smiled faintly. "Just try." Charles looked up from the chair, his breath catching. The room went silent, except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Sophia helped him sit on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. His legs quivered unsteady, but there was life in them now, something that hadn't been there for months. Liam pushed down with his palms, teeth clenched in concentration. Slowly, shakily, he lifted himself. For a heartbeat, all three of them froze. Then Sophia gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my God, you're doing it!" Charles stumbled forward, tears spilling before he could stop them. "You're standing, Liam. You're really standing." Liam swayed slightly, then took one trembling step toward his father before collapsing into his arms. They both laughed through tears, and Sophia felt something inside her finally break, not in pain, but in release. It was over. The nightmare that had consumed this family had finally begun to end. The doctors called it extraordinary. The press called it a miracle. But to Sophia, it was something deeper: redemption. Over the following weeks, Liam's recovery accelerated. With therapy, he began walking short distances, clinging to rails and nurses' hands. Each time he looked back at Sophia and said, "Watch me," and she always did, smiling, crying, whispering prayers under her breath. Meanwhile, the fallout outside grew massive. Headlines read, "Genovate Scandal. Uncovered. Children used in secret drug trials." Executives were arrested in a wave of investigations that reached across continents. News anchors replayed Sophia's recording endlessly, her unseen voice standing as the symbol of defiance against power. Charles declined every interview, every offer to tell his story. He didn't want fame, he wanted purpose. He met with attorneys, whistleblowers, and families who had come forward with similar stories. Many had lost children. Many had buried their pain in silence, too afraid to speak. One night, as he and Sophia walked through the hospital courtyard, he spoke quietly. "I spent years trying to buy redemption, but you showed me it's earned, not paid for." Sophia smiled faintly. "You just needed someone to remind you you're human." He nodded, his gaze turning toward the window where Liam slept peacefully. "When this is over," he said, "I'm going to make sure what happened to him never happens again." And he did. Within months, Charles used what remained of his fortune to establish the Westfield Foundation, named after the woman he had loved and failed to save. Its mission was simple: protect and support victims of illegal medical testing. It offered legal aid, medical treatment, and investigative grants for truth seekers like Sophia once was. The foundation's story spread everywhere, but not as a billionaire's act of charity. It was told as a story of accountability, of two ordinary people who refused to let a child's suffering stay hidden. Sophia stayed with the Westfields after Liam's release. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was family. Liam called her Mommy too, a name that melted her every time he said it. She cooked again, laughed again, and for the first time in years, the house felt like home. Charles often joined them at the table. Sometimes they'd talk for hours. Sometimes they'd sit in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but content simply to share the same peace. Months later, on a bright spring morning, the three of them drove to Evergreen Memorial Park. Liam had insisted on going. He carried a small bouquet of white flowers in his lap. When they reached Evelyn's grave, he stood, unaided this time, and placed them carefully beside her name. "Hi, Mom," he whispered. "I'm walking now." Sophia felt her throat tighten. Charles's eyes shimmered as he knelt beside his son. "She's proud of you," he said softly. "And she's proud of her." He glanced at Sophia, his voice thick with emotion. Liam looked up at her and smiled. "Mommy too, Mom sent you to me, didn't she?" Sophia couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears running freely down her face as she pulled him into a hug. The three of them stood there for a long time. No words. No sorrow, just quiet peace under the morning sun. That night, back at Westfield Manor, laughter returned to the house. Toys scattered across the living room. Music played softly from the piano. The same halls that once echoed with grief now carried the sound of healing. Charles watched as Sophia helped Liam set the dinner table, their voices light and easy. For a moment, he closed his eyes and listened, really listened, and realized this was the life Evelyn would have wanted. The shadows of Genovate still lingered in the world, but not here. Not anymore. Sophia looked up from the table, catching Charles watching them. She smiled. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "For the first time in years," he said, "I really am." Outside, the wind carried laughter through the open windows. the laughter of a child who had survived, a woman who had fought, and a man who had finally found peace. The truth had broken them once, but now it was the reason they were whole again. A year later, Westfield Manor no longer looked like the hollow monument it once was. The marble floors still gleamed, the portraits still hung proudly, but now the air was alive. The sound of laughter replaced the silence that had haunted its walls for years. It was Liam's 8th birthday. The garden was strung with lights, the same garden that had once been a place of fear. Now it was filled with joy, balloons tied to trees, children running barefoot across the grass, and the smell of cake drifting through the air. Charles stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching his son chase bubbles with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. Every laugh, every step was a miracle he never stopped thanking God for. Beside him, Sophia adjusted a tray of cupcakes on the table. Her smile was softer now, less guarded, more at peace. Time had eased the ache she carried, but it hadn't erased it. Some wounds didn't disappear. They simply learned to live quietly inside you. "You did all this?" Charles asked, motioning toward the decorations. Sophia shrugged, pretending not to smile. "Liam did most of it. He said he wanted blue lights because they feel happy." Charles laughed quietly. "He's got your taste." Sophia looked at him, her expression warm. "No, he's got his mother's hope, and your heart." For a while they stood in silence, watching the children run across the lawn. The wind stirred the lights overhead, scattering reflections across the faces of those who had come to celebrate not just a birthday, but a miracle. Later that evening, when the guests left and the sky turned gold with sunset, Liam came running up to them, breathless with excitement. "Can we go see Mom now?" Sophia nodded, her voice gentle. "Of course." They drove together to Evergreen Memorial Park. The world was quiet there, soft grass, faint bird song, and the hum of wind weaving through the trees. Liam carried a bouquet of lilies, his small hands clutching them carefully. When they reached Evelyn's grave, he knelt and placed the flowers at the base of the stone. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "I turned 8 today. You'd be really proud of me." Sophia felt her throat tighten. She knelt beside him and whispered, "She is proud, sweetheart. She always will be." Liam looked up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think she sent you, Mommy, too. I think she knew I'd need someone brave." Sophia's vision blurred with tears. She pulled him close, holding him tightly. "Maybe she did," she said quietly. "And I'm the lucky one." Charles stood behind them, silent, his eyes fixed on the headstone. The wind tugged gently at his jacket as he whispered, "She's here. Every day. I see her in him." He crouched beside Liam, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Your mom gave you life, and she gave me a reason to fight again." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. It was closure. When they returned home that evening, the house glowed under soft golden light. Dinner was simple: soup, bread, laughter. Liam sat between them, telling stories about his friends and showing off the small gift his doctor had given him, a charm in the shape of a star. "It's supposed to remind me to never give up," he said proudly. Sophia smiled. "Then it's perfect." After dinner, when Liam finally went to bed, Charles and Sophia lingered by the window. Outside, the moonlight washed over the garden, the same place where fear once lived, now reborn with light and memory. Charles spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come here?" Sophia's eyes softened. "Sometimes, but I don't let myself stay there. What matters is that we're here now." He nodded. "You changed everything, not just for us, for all those families." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "We changed it, Charles, together." He smiled faintly. "You know, I still talk to her sometimes." "To Evelyn." Sophia turned toward him, listening. "I tell her I kept my promise," he said. "That I'm fighting for the truth now, and that you—" his voice faltered. "That you kept us alive when I didn't know how." She blinked back tears, her voice quiet. She'd be proud of you. They stood in silence for a while, watching the wind move through the trees. Outside, the sound of faint laughter drifted down the hall, Liam talking in his sleep, dreaming of something bright. Charles exhaled softly. You know, the Foundation's getting letters every week now. Families who finally have hope. People who thought no one would ever hear them. Sophia nodded. That's what makes it worth it. And you? He asked. After everything, what do you want now? She looked out at the stars, a small smile forming. I just want to keep living in a house where laughter feels normal again. Charles smiled. Then I think we've already made it there. They stayed by the window for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the night. The shadows that once clung to every corner of Westfield Manor had faded, replaced by something gentler, forgiveness, healing, life. Before heading to bed, Charles paused at the old family portrait that still hung in the hallway, Evelyn holding baby Liam, sunlight frozen in the image. He touched the frame softly and whispered, "We're okay now." Then he turned off the light. The next morning, sunlight filled every corner of the house. Sophia was already in the kitchen making breakfast, humming softly. Liam came running in, barefoot and laughing. Charles followed, coffee mug in hand, smiling in a way he hadn't in years. The world outside could keep its noise and chaos. Inside Westfield Manor, peace had finally taken root, and for the first time, none of them were running from the past. They were living for what came after. Love had survived what greed tried to destroy. Truth had done what medicine never could. It healed.